On today's show, we're talking about qualities of a good leader. Today, we welcome back Matt and Christy Henderson.
Glad to be back.
It's wonderful to have you. Thank you for joining us today. One of the qualities that I think is very important is authority. You know, with authority, you can be the leader of an organization, of a church, and you're able to accomplish goals within an organization. But something that I think goes very well with that is influence. And let me just read you a definition of influence. Influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something. So when you have authority, yes, you're able to accomplish goals, but when you have influence, you're able to actually speak into others' lives. You know, it speaks to the fact that you've gained trust, you know, and access into the lives of those on your team. So you're able to accomplish goals, but you're also able to shape lives in the process.
Yeah, you know, one of the first things that came to my mind when you said influence was Jesus and his ministry with the woman at the well. You know, the religious leaders, they didn't want to go to Samaria. They didn't want to have anything to do with women. Yet here Jesus is, he intentionally goes to Samaria, and he speaks and he spends time in relationship with the woman at the well. And, you know, it caused the disciples, it caused a learning moment when people walked away with the realization of that I am going to influence people. That's what Jesus did. He influenced people by sharing his ability to interact and have a relationship with all people. And that's a part of influence, is that character that you mentioned, that I'm going to interact with all people, I'm going to spend time with all people, I'm going to lead all people. He had the authority to do that, in which he transferred to us to have that same authority.
That's good.
Yes. And you know, he did that with such great integrity.
Yeah.
You know, integrity is another character that I think is extremely important that every leader has. You know, that we stay true to what we say and what we do, and that we give a feeling of safety and quality around people, because when they feel that, it makes a huge difference on how they respond back to you on that.
Absolutely. If you lose your integrity,
oh yeah,
you know, with, you know, those
the
in your
trust
company,
is lost.
yeah,
The trust,
or
everything is lost.
those in your community, then you have no access anymore. You know,
There was a statement that we read earlier today, is that a reputation takes 20 years to earn, but 5 minutes to ruin it. And that's how I feel about integrity. You can gain integrity and have so much integrity, but it takes you but minutes to lose it. It's so critical for a leader to keep their integrity.
absolutely. Would you rather have, you know, gain that's the wrong way, and lose the respect of those around you? You know, what's the word say? You know, that we're supposed to have favor with God, but also favor with man. So when you lose your integrity, you lose that favor, not only with God, but you lose that favor with man also.
Yes, I agree.
Also, competency. Hope I'm saying that right. That's just having knowledge, you know, of your field, your industry that you're in. If we're going to lead people, you know, then we have to be knowledgeable of what we're trying to lead them into. So that's another good one.
Absolutely. I think the key one, and Christy, I think we were talking about it before also, is communication.
Yeah.
I think communication is so critical among our leaders. What are your thoughts on communication? Because I know that's a topic like you enjoy.
I think if you expect something, then you need to communicate directly what you expect, because you can't expect people to perform and give you what you want if you don't start being very direct.
Yes.
And be just very honest and real with people.
And clear.
Yes, and clear. And when you give that, then people respond to that. But when you give them something convoluted, when they're very confused, the product is convoluted and confused, and oftentimes it's not productive, and it wastes time. I think if you want to especially be efficient, be direct, be clear, and go ahead and upfront with it. And then people respond to that. And as a leader, you have to be very intentional with that before you communicate. So you need to have prepared before you communicate.
Yeah, so basically, if you don't know how to communicate, you can't be an effective leader, because it's such a key quality that you have to have. You have to know how to communicate in order for you to be a great leader.
It trickles down.
Absolutely.
It actually does. Yes, I agree.
I think too with communication, it's knowing your audience.
Yes.
You know, who are you communicating to?
Yes.
Different people you have to relate to different. You wouldn't talk to a small child the same you would talk
Exactly.
to an adult. You wouldn't talk to someone who's new in an area, you know, or a division of a organization the same way you talk to someone who's a veteran, you know, in that, you know, company. So knowing your audience.
Yeah, that's extremely important. I agree.
And humility, you know, being humble. You know, humility is, of course, having a self-awareness of yourself, but it's also having a awareness of others, you know, and when someone is elevated or, you know, promoted, you know, into another position or area, or they have knowledge, you know, in an area that you really want to learn, but you don't have that knowledge, you're not, what would you say, offended or, you know, hurt, you know, by that person, that person's getting all these accolades and you're not. You know, humility is really just, you know, promoting that person and letting them move forward and letting them go, and you not taking offense to that at all.
I think people respond
Yeah.
to that humility, like underneath them. If you're a humble leader, people are more likely to follow you. You're more likely to not try to have competition with you, but to work with you.
And a humble leader is not insecure enough to where when one of their people that they're leading rises up even better than they are, they're humble enough and good enough to say that was them, that wasn't me. They have become a better leader, even, and they have to be okay with that if the person that they're discipling becomes a better leader than they are.
Isn't that the goal?
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't that leadership?
For them to go further than you ever
Right,
could.
absolutely.
I had a manager that once told me, he says, you can tell if you're a real leader if your employees surpass you.
That's right.
Oh, that's a good, good
It's really good.
measure.
Yes, because that's the way it should be. Your employees should surpass you. You should be willing for them to take over your position.
Absolutely. What did Jesus say? You know, with
Greater
the disciples,
things.
greater things.
Greater
Yes.
things.
Absolutely. That should be the goal of leadership. You know, number one, you're not a leader unless someone's following you.
That's right.
You know, so if someone's following you and you're pouring into someone else, the goal should be to raise them up to do greater things, to surpass where you're at. Our children, we want our children to surpass where we're at. You know, that's the heart of a good mother and father, to see your children, whether natural or spiritual, grow and become more than what you are.
I think the most powerful moment we ever had in our student ministry was one week where we stepped back and they took over. They were the ones ministering, they were the ones speaking, they were the ones that were running the show. And we just sat back and empowered them to do it. And we weren't offended by it. It was actually one of the most beautiful things that we ever saw.
It is.
Yes, and you
It
said a
is.
key word, which I think is one of the qualities that I also think is important, is empowerment. Because as if you feel empowered, then in turn you empower others, and then they step up, just like you said. And it's no longer you're doing the work and you're the one in charge, but no, they're in charge. They're running it for you. You don't even have to do a thing. All you need to do is oversee it. And I think that's amazing when you have that sense of empowerment, so that you can pass it down and others can take over.
Absolutely. Focus is another one that I have. I have a quote on my refrigerator at home, and it says, "Do fewer things more often, and you will become better at them." You know, as a leader, we can get into doing 50 billion things, you know, bouncing around constantly when you're especially leading different departments. So for you to take time to just hone in and focus in on what you're doing, you can become better, you know, at what you're doing. Even if you're not an administrative person, maybe as a leader you can hire an assistant, to help you organize, so you can become more efficient and focus on the things, too, that you need to focus on.
Delegation.
Yes.
If you're
Delegation.
focused on too many things, then you're not really focused at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now,
Absolutely.
you guys, I know you're leaders in the school systems. You're leaders among the children, and I know that you have been youth leaders for so long. What do you think was your main focus when you're in those positions? Because I think everybody's focus is slightly different, but there is so much to do in the student ministry. How do you hone in on the things that you really need to focus on?
Well, the gospel says to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so the thing that we really prioritized was telling our students to go. You are the church. You don't just come to a church. You are the church. And we tried very hard to equip and empower them to operate, in their faith, to have active faith, not just where they come to service, but to have active faith to go pray for people, to go to guide people and lead people, and to go share the gospel with others.
Thank you guys so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
on today's show.
Yes.
It's been a wonderful talk today.
Absolutely. You guys been great as always. And thank you guys for joining us as well. Remember, there's great qualities of a good leader. Grasp onto those qualities and become a great leader.